Welcome to Let's Talk Criterion, your exclusive channel previewing and reviewing new releases in the Criterion collection. In this first edition for July, we take a look at Fritz Lang's film The Big Heat from 1953, coming to the collection in 4K UHD. Now, it may come as a surprise that Fritz Lang's 1953 classic film The Big Heat isn't already in the Criterion collection, when we have his other films like M and Ministry of Fear. The Big Heat came after he directed The Blue Gardenia, and he was coming to the end of his film career at the time. He would only direct another 7 films and end his career in 1960. The Big Heat was first published in a serialized form in the Saturday Evening Post newspaper, and then as a novel by its author, William P. McGivern, and this was the basis, of course, for the screenplay, which was written by the former crime reporter Sidney Bohm. The Big Heat stars Glenn Ford as Dave Bannion, Gloria Grahame as Debbie Marsh, Jocelyn Brando as Katie Lagana, Lee Marvin as Vince Stone, Jeanette Nolan as Bertha Duncan, and Peter Whitney as Tierney, and Willis Bucci as Lieutenant Ted Wilkes. And The Big Heat is about Detective Dave Bannion, played by Glenn Ford. He's a sergeant detective with confident ambitions of being the commissioner. He's got the American dream life as well. A nuclear family with a happy wife, that's Katie, played by Jocelyn Brando, and a cute daughter with the most syrupy music playing over every scene with them in it together. Now, when a fellow detective commits suicide, Bannion is convinced that there's foul play afoot, courtesy of a major crime syndicate, and that's led by mob boss Mike Lagana, played in the film by Alexander Scarby. He single-handedly pushes for an investigation, leading himself down a path where he must deal with opposition from both his own police force and with Lagana's top muscle, Vince Stone, Lee Marvin, and Stone's abused girlfriend, Debbie, Gloria Grahame. Now, the thing that leaps out the quickest about Bannion here is his attitude and how disconnected he feels from his actions. He always comes off as a glib and callous man, like he's stuck in the bedside manners mode that doctors sometimes have with patients. Whether he's talking to the widow of the dead cop or interrogating the cop's mistress, it feels like he isn't truly emotionally invested in anything he's doing. He simply is going through the motions of what he is supposed to do as part of his job. He presents himself as a noble I want facts pursuer of justice, but he never espouses much more than a deep vendetta against Lagana, even before knowing the corruption actually comes from Lagana. It's like his sole idea of justice is taking down the bad guys, with little consideration for what that would actually entail, or indeed the emotional costs it has on him personally or the people around him. As a fellow detective warns Bannion in the film, you've decided people are all scared rabbits and you spit on them. You can't set yourself against the world and get away with it. Glenn Ford's Bannion is definitely motivated by vengeance. Now, throughout the first half of the film, we see what Bannion is like at home with his family, and it paints an odd picture indeed. He has the most squeaky clean and wholesome life imaginable, but you can pick up on all these strange micro-behaviours that paint a picture of a man with undertones of cold ambition and misogynist tendencies. In a clever visual metaphor, when Bannion is being told by the commissioner that he can't pursue Lagana, he pouts in his daughter's room. Now, she's building a police station out of blocks, and he puts a block on top of it that sends the whole thing crumbling down, and it hits her in the face. Now, His desperation to build something here to serve his feelings is so great that he's willing to put innocent people in danger. Now, many of the detective films of the 1940s to the early 1950s were content to be standard cliché fests, made by competent directors, save for some exceptions like Out of the Past. The Big Heat was made by Fritz Lang, who was far more than just competent as a director. Starting out as the leading definer of the German expressionist movement of the early 20th century, with films like I mentioned, like M, Metropolis and Dr. Mabuse, The Gambler, of course, he fled Nazi Germany in 1933, and he started making Hollywood films in 1936. Now, when he made the transition, he made some of the most psychologically tragic noirs ever made, like Scarlet Street, for instance. Lang's films, both pre- and post-Hollywood, were notable for his adeptness at plunging into the mechanics of evil and how that evil manifests itself in society. Of his Hollywood-era films, The Big Heat is perhaps the scariest and most accurate to the concept of the banality of evil, as the depravity of Banyan's sense of justice is superficially endorsed, since he's securely in his sergeant position and jovially asks for hot coffee as he's off to a new case. Now, rather than go down a path of tragic consequences that force the protagonist to own up to his character flaws, Banyan is instead propped up as a hero completely oblivious to his villainy. No matter the fact that both his commissioner and his gangster opponents beg him to stop searching, bridging the connection between how the law is made no better than the actual criminals through corruption. Now we look at Lee Marvin's character. His character is brutally sadistic and cruelly violent. He's quick to anger as well, and he's emotionally charged and unpredictable. It's a great performance here from Lee Marvin, and quite frightening as well. Situations in the film escalate quickly, and much of the violence in the film is abrupt and unexpected to the audience, and this makes it all the more shocking. Now, the camera work in the film is deceptively simple on the whole, but on reflection, it's quite carefully planned though. The characters are precisely positioned within the frame, and the camera always moves with purpose, to reveal or indeed to hide. Now, as this is often described as a film noir, I was actually expecting a lot of expressionistic framing to take place, with interesting camera angles and shadows, but we don't get any of this. This is surprising, particularly as its director, Fritz Lang, comes from the background of German expressionism, the inspiration behind the camera work in many film noirs. But then again, this film doesn't really fit into the film noir formula either. Now, in fact, this film is very different from Fritz Lang's German films. They sort of include the iconic science fiction epic Metropolis, the Mabuse gangster films, and the stunning child killer drama M. Now, in these, the characters deliberately are really nothing more than ciphers or archetypes, while in The Big Heat, the characters there have psychological complexity. Also in the German films, the sets are huge and they're designed to be impressive. They are almost characters themselves in the film, and they begin to be clearly artificial. Now, in The Big Heat, the sets are realistic. The script and the direction in The Big Heat is crystal clear. Despite the complex plot, you always know exactly what's going on. And it's also stripped of unnecessary detail, and that, of course, is thanks largely to its director. Now, this is a 4K restoration, and the image is a little soft here and there, but it's generally clean and impressive, with lustrous whites and velvety nuanced blacks. Said cleanness of the image bolsters the sense of interplay taking place between the foreground and the background of the shots, and that's always intensely important in Fritz Lang films, as they're often parables of community at war with itself. Now, also, facial details are densely rendered in this restoration, which is also pivotal to preserving the impact of such an extreme study of faces. The soundtrack swiftly, gracefully balances the important background noises, that's the simmering of coffee, the humming of a crowd in a bar, with the foreground of the score and the dialogue, which is very clear. In other words, all the elements are in harmony in this attractive restoration of one of the great American classics. Now, the film was restored, as I say, in 4K from the 35mm original picture negative and a 35mm fine-grain master positive. 4K scanning of both elements were completed at Cineric in New York on their 4K Wetgate scanner. Now, Cineric was also responsible for the digital image restoration, and that included digitally recreating missing frames in the negative itself. And at Motion Picture Imaging in Burbank, a senior colorist completed the conforming, grading and DCP creation. And the audio was restored from the 35mm original Soundmasters at Deluxe Audio Services in Hollywood. And now the big heat comes to the Criterion Collection as a 4K Blu-ray combo with the film on a 4K UHD disc and a Blu-ray also with the film and these supplemental features. We have a new audio commentary by film noir experts Anna Silver and James Orsini. New video essay by critic Farron Smith-Name on the women in the film. Audio interviews with the director Fritz Lang, conducted by film historian Gideon Bachman and filmmaker Peter Bogdanovich. Interviews with filmmakers Michael Mann and Martin Scorsese. We have a trailer for the film, and as always with all Criterion releases, a written essay by the author Jonathan Lethem. And new cover art is designed by Drusilla Adeline Sister Hyde. Co-starring an iconic Gloria Graham as the mink-coated gangsters mall with their own axe to grind, and featuring a supporting cast led by a sensationally sleazy Lee Marvin, the big heat hits with raw and unstoppable force. The film has a running time of 89 minutes, and it comes in an aspect ratio of 1:37:1, and it's released as a 4K Blu-ray combo on Tuesday the 1st of July in the US as Spine 1269. Now, I mistakenly teased Barry Lyndon 4K at the end of the last edition of Let's Talk Criterion, and of course the big heat has its release first, but now I can safely state that we will be featuring Barry Lyndon in the next edition of Let's Talk Criterion, as it comes to the collection in its 4K UHD upgrade on Tuesday the 8th of July. I would also like to mention that the July Barnes & Noble sale is now well underway, with 50% off all Criterion titles, as well as 50% off the July release slate. Sadly, they won't be offering 50% of any pre-orders for titles releasing after July, and that includes the Wes Anderson collection. But hopefully they'll offer 50% of that set in their November sale, as it will have already been released. So perhaps you'll be able to pick yourself up some half-price bargains on titles that you want in the Barnes & Noble stores and online this month. Until the next edition of Let's Talk Criterion, it's goodbye from me, as always, and good Criterion viewing.